And the recording is in progress. Couple things before we get started. Please send your contact information to the email you see on your screen, mdesanto@uaoh.net. Please put Reading Road in the subject line. That once you do that, going forward, any future correspondence, any notices that get sent out on this project, we'll have your email, and we can include you. Also, at the end, if we don't address your or answer a question you have, or you think of something later, you can email that address any questions you have, and we can get a response back to you. For this meeting, if you do have questions, I ask that you put it in the chat box that you have on your screen. Questions, comments, whatever you want to share, if you want to enter it in the chat box. We'll also have time, if you would prefer to speak at the end of the meeting. We can open up your microphone and we can do it that way. But we'll go through any questions in the chat first, and then if someone would still like to speak, we'll have you raise your hand and unmute you so that you can do that. So a couple things first, just introductions of who we are. Obviously, we're the Upper Arlington team. My name is Gary Wolfong. I'm the Public Service Director. I also have Carla Odebrowski, harder name than mine to say. She's our city engineer on the call. Aaron Scott is on the call as well. And we also have our two engineering coordinators, Sebastian French and Chad Ritzler, on the call. A little bit of an agenda. We'll go through the background of the project, talk about some concerns we're aware of, active transportation, which is basically bicycles and pedestrian, and then just, if you have any questions, any feedback you want to give us, we would love to hear it. When looking at this, when we get into it, as I said, the background of this is from our capital improvement program. This was originally put in our capital improvement program several years ago for resurfacing. The screen you see now, we do a PCR on our pavements. That's the pavement condition rating, and that tells us where the street is at. We also do an analysis of the curb. And you'll see on this stretch that the PCR last done in 2018 was 83. So it's probably a little bit lower now. And the curb rating is a 3 there. One thing to keep in mind with the PCR, that's from 0 to 100, with 100 being the best, that's perfect, and 0 being obviously the worst. And the curb rating is from 1 to 5, but the good to bad is flipped. 1 is the best and 5 is the worst. So just something to keep in mind. The average for the city for those two numbers is a 90 and a 2. So we're a little worse on this stretch than the average. The 83 isn't on the pavement is not horrible by any means. You guys see the pavement, but it's also a collector road that we're looking at, as you see there, construction in a couple of years, it's going to just continue to get worse. So that's why we have it on our radar. As we look at this, there's two things that come to mind. One is some of you might be aware, and were involved in a couple of years ago. Some OSU students did a look at this roadway. They reached out to residents, they got input on what should this roadway be, and so we'll talk about some of that since we're resurfacing anyways. And the other thing that we wanted to look at was just bikeway connections and connections to the Ohio Trail, and see if we could do something here that would benefit that. One reason we're having this conversation now is we're really early in the process. We've not started design. No decisions have been made, other than we're going to resurface it and do some curb and gutter replacement. We're going to discuss some other options here in a little bit, but no decisions have been made. But we think this is a good candidate for MORPC funds, and so their cycle is long, and so we have to submit an application now for that. This would be, it's called a pre-screening application. This is just kind of the first draft to send to them. It doesn't lock us into the scope of a project. It doesn't lock us into anything, but it gives them basically an idea, you know, here's a picture of a project we're thinking of, and they give us feedback on if this would score, if they think this would score well for an official submission. Obviously, we're hopeful that we could get some outside funding, and that would obviously help with the city's overall budget. So that's where we're at today. I mentioned the OSU study that was done in I think it started in January of 2020, where they reached out to residents. Want to kind of go over the input that they heard at that time. And this is kind of a high level. This was the top things that the residents voiced at that time of what their concerns were. The two biggest issues were speeding and pedestrian safety, were the top two concerns. You also see there, they did do a speed analysis. The speed limit's 35. That's not as significant based on that when you're looking at the average. But as you look at what the speed limit should be set at, it isn't just set looking at the average. So I definitely understand the concerns of speeding in the corridor. One note is on this, the OSU study did extend further south than the limits for this project, but you know, today we're only talking about the Zollinger to Fishinger section, but this still applies. So looking at the concerns, that the top two concerns that were raised back then, we wanted to just kind of show, you know, here's some options that could address those concerns. What you're seeing here is a narrowing or reducing of the number of travel lanes on the corridor. Now, there's some options that you see here that won't work. That won't work on this corridor. For example, the first one at the top you see it before with 2 lanes in each direction, and then the after, which is 1 lane in each direction with the center turn lane, bike lanes, and parking. We obviously don't have the right of way or the pavement width to do that. That's kind of the perfect world in a case like this, but that's not feasible here. You see the road diets on the left-hand side of the screen. Those show, you know, if you reduce the number of travel lanes, but provide bike lanes, you know, that's an option that some places do as well. You know, it's my understanding this was actually done out here several years ago, and it just wasn't successful because it took away that parking. And so, you know, full disclosure up front, we do not want to. We have no intentions of looking at an option that completely removes parking out there. But again, I just wanted to kind of show some stuff. The one on the right is where we think might be a solution. You see a through lane in each direction, and you have a parking lane. And then for the bike accommodations, you can put in sharrows, which are simply pavement markings in the pavement for bikes to travel in the same lane as vehicles. Looking at the concerns that were expressed a couple years ago, this is, you know, our initial thoughts of what might be an acceptable solution to the residents. One thing you see there that is beneficial is at select locations, you can, you know, install that curb extension that really reduces that pedestrian crossing and helps pedestrians feel more comfortable crossing the street. Also provides that additional narrowing of the roadway to help with the traffic calming and the lowering of the speeds. All these options show that reducing the number of travel lanes. That's kind of a typical proposal or solution when speeding and safety are big concerns. As I mentioned, you can help with the pedestrians by reducing the number of lanes they have to cross. It also slows vehicles down by making vehicles, as you're traveling, feel more restricted, and you don't feel like you're driving on a runway. You tend to slow down, and that's what studies have shown with these types of improvements. It also typically helps with accidents. When you're able to get that left turning movement out of the through lane of traffic, that helps with the safety from that perspective as well, and improves the safety of the corridor. So I think one question you may have is why even the discussion of bike accommodations here. Just want to kind of show this. This is what's going on around Reading Road. Reading Road is not specifically called out on, for example, MORPC's Central Ohio Greenway Plan, but it was listed in our budget as something to explore. And the reason we want to explore that is, you see in the north side is Fishinger. That first section right here, Fishinger from Tremont to Mount View, that construction is going to start later this year. And that project is going to put in 8-foot wide sidewalk to accommodate bikes. The next phase of that's going to start in 2024, and it'll continue it on down to Riverside. So you'll have an 8-foot path along Fishinger between Tremont and Riverside in the next couple of years. On Zollinger Road on the south, Zollinger is identified on the Central Ohio Greenways by MORPC as they view that as an important east-west connector for the region. And so that's a project that MORPC would like to see bike accommodations made for. So we're exploring options on Zollinger for a different project, or in a different project. And so we'll see how we end up going that way. But the thought is, if we are able to accommodate bikes on Reading, we're giving people a north-south connection between those two potential bike facilities. So that's kind of the thought process of why we're discussing it with this project. Want to show this as well. This is kind of a good example. The picture you see is actually from Google. We did not stage this photo, but it's kind of a good example of how the roadway would travel if we did you know, a two-way left turn lane in the middle with one lane on each side and a parking lane with sharrows. So you would have a parking lane, you see the truck there, you would have the bike traveling in the through lane. The lane that has Reading Road would be a two-way left turn lane, and then the farthest on the right would be the through lane in the other direction. So that's just a good photo of how that would feel to a driver on the street. Looking at parking, that's something that OSU students did as well. You could see there that in polling the residents, often what was the response to how often parking is utilized, about 35%. And they actually did go out and take counts and see where that parking was happening. And what they found was 71% of the vehicles that park are parking on the west side of the road. Which, again, this is all information that kind of leads us into thinking that, you know, this option would be feasible. They looked at the number of vehicles parked as well, which definitely didn't surpass the number that would still be left if we did this. So that's what we're thinking. Like I said, it's where we're at today in our thoughts, but nothing is decided. We wanted to get some feedback on this prior to, really going forward, which is our starting point today. We want to hear from you. Our next step is, as I mentioned, the pre-screen application to MORPC, which we will be submitting soon. Keep in mind, like I said, that doesn't lock us into something that we have to do. That'll get decided later, but it lets MORPC start giving us an idea if they will help contribute to the project. Moving forward, then design would start next year with construction in 2025. If any of you were involved with that OSU study, I think back then they were looking at 2024, but our current plan shows it in 2025. So that's just kind of a big picture look of where we're at with the project. So that's all I had to go through. Definitely want to hear from you guys. We'll address any comments you put in the chat. I'll have Carla jump on here and we can go through any comments you have. If you want to submit something in writing, you see Mandy's email on the screen as well. Please email her. Even if you don't have questions, email her so you can get on our list and we know who you are and can keep you in the loop as we go forward. We'll go through questions in chat, and then once we get through those, if anybody would prefer to talk, you can raise your hand. There's a little button you can see to raise your hand, and Carla will help unmute you, and you can ask a question or provide a comment. But Carla, do we have any questions that we can help with?
Yeah, so far a couple comments and just one question. So we'll start with that. Last summer's accidents had cars land on the sidewalks. Can curb extensions help prevent that?
I definitely want to look at the specifics of the accident before I give a specific answer on that. In general, the benefit would come in that if we did curb extension and we did this traffic calming effort, the vehicle should be going slower. And so the likelihood of them leaving the pavement should go down. That would be the main benefit that I would see with that. But as this goes forward, we'll definitely be looking at accident reports and if there was a specific spot that there's been an issue where curb extensions would help, that would be something we would look at. I don't envision curb extensions at every intersection, but that's, again, decisions that will be made going forward as we get design. But the biggest thing I see there would be the traffic calming and the lower speeds would help keep vehicles in the roadway. But we'll definitely look at that. Now we'll definitely be looking into those accident reports.
That's the only question. We've got a couple comments there, but like Gary mentioned, if you'd like to speak and share your comments with the group, you're welcome to do so. Otherwise, I know occasionally we've done a few of these virtual meetings and people are sometimes slow to raise their hand, but feel free, or if something comes up later, you can email Mandy or reach out to any of us.
Okay. If there isn't anything else, I'll just say that I appreciate your time. I appreciate you jumping on. Please email Mandy so we have your contact information. And I think that's about it. Carla, if you want the recording, I'll let Carla talk about recording.
Yep, we'll put the recording and a copy of the presentation on the same web address that you guys use in order to join this meeting. And we'll try to keep as much information updated there as we can.
Yep. I'll do one last call. If there's any other comments or if someone would like to speak. Okay. Seeing none, I thank you for your time, and we'll let you get back to your families and the rest of your life. Thank you. We look forward to working with you going forward.